Welcome to Lead for Good, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. This is a show where the audience will meet and get to know top nonprofit leaders. Together, we will take a deep dive into nonprofit leadership, endeavoring to uncover and unpack the most important characteristics, traits, strategies, and actions of successful nonprofit leaders. Through this journey together, we desire to help you, the nonprofit leader, grow your knowledge and capabilities to lead for good. We want you to achieve your full potential as leaders in the sector. So, welcome to the conversation. We're glad you joined us today. Without further delay, let's join our host, Chris Looney, as he interviews yet another extraordinary leader who is truly leading for good. Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, welcome to Lead for Good, the podcast where we explore leadership, innovation, and organizational excellence in mission-driven organizations. Today, we're talking about something that sits at the heart of every successful organization: culture, values, and the way we live them out every day. In this episode, we're joined by Art Groeneveld, CEO of Boys and Girls Clubs of Huntington Valley. Art has extensive experience in nonprofit leadership, strategic growth, and people-centered organizational change. And today he's leading the Boys and Girls Clubs of Huntington Valley through an exciting new initiative to articulate and embed organizational values that reflect the shared purpose and strengths of every team member. So we'll explore Art's leadership journey, why culture matters more now than ever in nonprofits, and how the clubs are approaching a new values rollout and practical insights that any leader can apply to their organization. So let's get started. Art, welcome to Lead for Good.
Thank you very much, Chris. Glad to join you today. It should be fun.
It's going to be fun. We've known each other for a long time, and we always have good conversations. In fact, you all should have been a part of the conversation we were just having, but we'll save that for later. But right now, we want to start by talking about your path in leadership. So, what initially drew you into nonprofit work and ultimately to the Boys and Girls Clubs of Huntington Valley?
I just happened into nonprofit work like so many people. I worked for the city of Lakewood through high school, my first few years of college. And then I got married and became an electrician's apprentice for a year. And, work got slow. And I thought, man, I want to get back into recreation. And I saw an ad for a Boys and Girls Club as their athletic director. And I didn't know anything about a Boys and Girls Club. I applied. And so it was athletics that brought me in. And then, I was in that position probably 6 or 7 years, and I got recruited by the Orange County Sheriff's Department. And as a deputy sheriff trainee, as a special program to bring recruits in early so they could excel and be the top of their class in the whatever you call that training that you would do. And so the job they sent me to do was the attorney bond section in jail. And so as I sat in there every day, I'd work 5 days a week and then train on the weekends before the academy started. And I just kept hearing the story from these inmates. Oh, my friend, it really wasn't me. I just happened to be. It was the same stories I heard at the club from these kids. Yeah. I just said, man, it's too late for these guys. I want to go back to the Boys and Girls Club. And that was the first time as an adult I said, I guess nonprofit work is for me and I want to go make a difference. So it didn't happen that way, but it did happen eventually.
No, that's a great path, and clearly you realized it was mission-aligned work. So I love hearing that. So who were the early influences or mentors that really shaped how you lead today?
Yeah, man, when you've been with an organization 35 years, you've had a lot of great mentors, and you've had a few boobs along the way too. So I've got to be careful not to mention their names, and I'll tell you, I've got some mentors that I meet with monthly. That I have a phone call with every 6 months. And I have mentors that I just watch from afar that do great things. But I'll tell you, there's two really good ones. At some point we needed to hire a new director of finance. And this gentleman by the name of Bob Nagel applied for the job. He was 60, moving from Indiana, and incredible guy. And we hired him. And after we hired him, he said, man, I didn't think anyone would hire an old guy to come work. It's like, wow, you seem to be a great guy and you know your stuff. And he ended up being a great guy. And he moved from Indiana to California because his kids had moved out here. And so he
Uh-huh.
wanted to be near grandkids. And so Bob Nagel was the old Polish Midwesterner who had those values. He said he used to always smoke and everything. So he'd call his kids every day from the office and ask them what they need on his way home.
Oh,
After every call, he never said, I love you to his kids because that was how he grew up. You don't show emotion. But every
right.
call and he'd stop by the house to drop off kids' stuff, make
Yeah,
sure they
yeah.
had food or whatever. So he showed me what being a dad of adults is like. And I'll never forget Bob Nagel, the guy who couldn't tell his kids I love you when his
Yeah.
son took a job in Chicago. And Bob told me his son was moving to Chicago. He cried in the office, this small
No.
bird of a gentleman who couldn't. So he just showed me,
Yeah,
right? Love takes a lot of different courses and actions, and so never
right.
doubt Bob's love for his children, but he never said it. So I very intentionally make sure I say it because I think it's really important. But then I try to match his actions, and then recently, in
Oh,
2019, the Boys and Girls Club was getting ready for some leadership transition. There were a lot of things going on. I was paired with a mentor, an outside consultant to work with, a guy by the name of Charlie Solano. He runs a program called Chief Leadership. He retired chief of police, and he really taught me empathy, and then in leadership, the need for self care. And
mm.
he talked a lot about being a CEO, and in leadership, you're so alone. You can't forget about taking care of yourself. And so those two guys, some things I hold on for dear, but I could tell you stories from mentors all over the place that I absolutely truly love and invest in me, offer little pieces of advice, and more often than not, it's their actions, right? They match
Yeah.
their words, and you see them out there living it out, and those are the folks that draw me close.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love the fact that you referenced a couple of folks that are non-traditional mentors. They weren't supervisors,
Yeah,
as is so often the case, and that's totally appropriate. But it's even more eye-opening when you can identify people that have been strong mentors, transformational figures in your life who you've worked with or you've just admired the way they are. So thank you for bringing those forward. What about your leadership style? How has that evolved over the years, especially in times of challenge or change?
my leadership style. Yeah, people would say I was a real hard ass at the beginning, right? I'm very
Yep.
much a logistics type of guy, and I'll tell young people when they come work for me, I always give them this phrase: say what you mean and do what you say, and then I'll remind them, be a person of honor, right? And if you can do those things, we're never going to have a problem because you're going to make a mistake and it's going to be okay. But I love logistics. That's my favorite thing. Give me a problem. We're going to scope out a plan and we're going to make it successful because we're going to keep charting it all the way. But as you
I love
grow,
it.
yeah, it's great. But as you grow through leadership, eventually you got to become more of a cheerleader, right? And a cheerleader, someone who can identify people's strengths and weaknesses, put them in areas where they'll grow, and then put them in areas where they'll really just hit a home run for you. And so,
Hmm.
my leadership style, I've gone from the guy when he walked into the building, somebody either knew they were going to be in trouble, or going to have a difficult conversation, to the guy that now when I walk in the building, they may still be a little nervous because that the title holds some nervousness, I guess. Yeah, it's really unfortunate. I tell people all the time, you don't have to. I'm part of the team. When I talk to people about who I am, I say I work with, right? We are a workforce together. I get the opportunity to claim credit for all of your great work. That's the number one job as a CEO, and it's very unfortunate. And so now I've turned into more of a cheerleader, more of a planner, more of a strategic guy. And then, one of the things I've always hated is I've hated blowhards. People that tell you, pies in the sky, and then they no substance. But man, what you start learning is as a leader, you have to deliver some of those messages, even if you're not as close to being complete as you need to be, because you might empower somebody to step up and help you fill that missing link that you haven't been able to do. And I'm one of those guys, I don't like to say it until I know it's pretty much close to accomplishment. But now, as the CEO, I have to sometimes just go out on a limb and say, this is where we're going. This is how we're getting there, even if I don't have all the answers and pieces. And so
Right.
that's a one thing that in the last couple of years has really challenged me. And, I think sometimes I do well in that space and sometimes I fall way short. And so, but
Yeah, yeah, I totally get it. But how wonderful that you acknowledge the fact that in the early days you were more sort of command and control, leadership style, and learned, and probably quickly, that in the nonprofit world, as is the case in a lot of different environments, that command and control style of leadership is not the one that produces the right culture, the right outcomes, and allows people the opportunity to really feel like they're contributors and they're experts and they're making a difference.
Yeah, it was more of a thought of completing the task, not making sure that that program, that outreach continued, and so that's where the philosophy for me has changed, right? You can't
Yeah.
just keep completing tasks, you've got to build and scale. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's
you,
hard for a lot of individual contributors who are hard charging, doers, used to really achieving great things because of their capacity to just check things off a list and focus and drive hard and work hard. But like you said, that's not necessarily the same skill set that's required to lead a team.
right. Yeah, not at all. Lead a team and have them come back and
Right.
be engaged and want to do better each day, because that's
Right,
what it
right.
takes.
You are not working on a singular project to build a bomb or put some, one on the moon. You actually have to sustain this in perpetuity for the benefit
Yes.
of the community. So, a slightly different approach might be necessary. Well, all of this contributes to our conversation around culture and values. So let's focus on the work the clubs there are doing around culture and values. You're rolling out a new organizational value statement and leadership exercise across the entire organization. I'd love to unpack both the why and the how. So, why did the leadership team decide now is the time to clarify and articulate values across the organization?
Right. Yeah. So, I was executive director for 20 years before I became the CEO 5 years ago. And so, one of the things right after COVID, surviving that, staying open, our resources weren't great. So, right, I had two mandates, right? Increase our resources and build our team. We had lost through COVID some great people who'd been with us 30, 40 years, and they didn't come back. They lived. We lost them because the health risks. They decided to stay retired. So we lost a
Yep.
lot of generational knowledge for our organization. And so we came in, and so in that, as I was building it, I couldn't roll out cultures and values because I haven't invested in them. I haven't made my staff feel secure. I haven't provided a lot of training resources. You can bring in outside trainers. So what I did for the first couple of years is just really invested in our staff, and we invested a lot in understanding. Right? We all went through COVID, and the experience for some of us was so far different than others. Right? If you had a house and you had a family around you, you got through COVID and it was unique and it was a change, man. But if you were struggling, it hurt you bad. And I got to see a lot of that. I got to see a lot of my coworkers who didn't have the means that maybe I did really struggle. They got through. And so now you got to thank them. And so, we've increased our rates for pay 20 to 35% in the last couple of years. We've invested in our resources. One of the things that we've invested, when you got a Boys and Girls Club, right? We want our buildings to be first class, our programs to be first class. We invest in a lot of front of the house stuff because you're asking parents to trust you. I needed to ask my
Right.
staff to trust me too. So I started investing in the tools that they use every day, the spaces they use, and I can continue to do that. And so we just had to show them, trust us, we understand you, and we support you. And then the world environment changed too. And one of the things I always love is understanding. So we went through with our management team on these practices of understanding other life perspectives. So we read young adult literature. Jason Reynolds being our first one in his book Sunny, so people could see what life was like for other people, and then that way we could see our similarities. So we went
Love
through
it.
a bunch of that. We continue to go through that, and the one thing, when my first month in the job, an individual sent an email to many of our supporters that said, I can't support the Boys and Girls Club because they support the LGBTQ lifestyle. And it was like, first month in the job, what's going on? And it hurt me. But the one thing I realized, we're in a pretty conservative area, is I don't ever want to be a person that stops somebody else from being their true authentic self. And so that's what I spent a lot of time talking with my staff on. What walls do we have up where other people don't feel comfortable? So that's what we built on, learning about each other, building our workforce, and then so we took them on a leadership journey, and I hired a leadership consultant to walk my management team, about 30 people, through the leadership. What does leadership for the Boys and Girls Club look like? We laid it all out, and about three
Yeah.
weeks into it, I couldn't attend that meeting. The trainer called me and he said, Art, I had a great session with you guys. You guys are doing great work. They're talking about the culture at the club, but I know you don't have a culture statement. He said, why don't you let me know for the next 2 sessions? Why don't you stay away? Let me work with your team, and we're going to develop your culture, your values from your team, because they already have it, and let them present it to you. And so we did it, and it was phenomenal. And it was, things that I loved and were important to our organization, and things they loved. And the one thing that I asked that we did is that we made sure that we developed our culture and value around just 4 pillars, right? Keeping
Okay.
people safe, valuing our employees, financial stewardship, right? You can't ask for money if you're not watching the way you're spending the money. And then donor and community partnership relationship, right? There's so much in nonprofit space. It's about relationships. And so our staff need to know that, right? Then when Art calls because he says he's bringing a tour over, it's not for you guys to hide and not engage. Art wants you to engage with that tour to show you are the reason for the tour, not Art. You are. And they were so much used to just being asked to look really good during a tour, not asking any questions because you don't want to stub your toe. To no, no, you are part of it. You're the reason we're successful.
Right.
And so
Right.
that's what we really did, is just trying to celebrate folks and let them know you're the reason the club is successful, not Art, not anybody else, not the board, and it's you. And it really helped. It's been a lot of fun.
Okay, so we went through those 4 pillars really fast.
Yeah.
I'd like to kind of go back and just very slowly kind of
Okay.
mention those 4 pillars, and I will probably hit them again, but I
Yeah.
think it's so fundamental to understand what your 4 are, and it doesn't have to be the 4 for everybody, but
Right.
like some organizations and some leaders don't even know where to start. So let's talk about those 4 again. You don't have to describe them all, but what are the 4 again?
Yeah. Here. And when you say some leaders don't know where to start, I was one of those leaders, right?
We all are, yeah.
Yeah, I know what my values are, kind of, but I never really took the time to write them down, to think about them. So this was our goal. And so number one, right, use safety and well-being, right? I when I meet parents, the first thing I try to almost always tell them is thank you for trusting us with your child, right? That's their number one resource. They're letting us take care of their child, starting from 6 weeks into college. And but each one of them, it's a family that brought them here, so they want something good for their kid. That's why they chose the Boys and Girls Club. So that's number one, their safety and well-being. Youth. Second, employee value and support. I wanted my employees to know you are valued. You, like I said, you are the reason for our success. And how can we support you? One of the things we did right after COVID is like I set up a care account. We had a employee whose husband took his own life, right? But we didn't have a mechanism to give her some money to help with rent to get her through those things. Board members stepped up, and so we filled that hole. But again, that was came out of this value and these pillars of what's important to us. And the third is financial stewardship. I am so fortunate. I'm in an organization that has a finance committee that meets monthly, reviews my finances, talks about where we're going, where our reserves are, and then donate. And so when people talk to us about why should we invest in the Boys and Girls Club, I can tell them about our programs, and then I can tell them again about how I'm going to honor their donation, and where it's going to go and who's going to make sure that I do it right. And so we consider ourselves really lucky on that. And then the fourth is our donor and community partnerships, because during COVID, it really showed us it was a community that stood up to make sure we could pass out food, to make sure we had space, to make sure that rent was taken care of, to give our families gift cards and those kind of things. And then donors, they two things about donors: they want to invest in a winner, and they want to invest in something that's close to whatever they want to invest in. And you can get donors that don't know anything about the Boys and Girls Club, don't really have it as a top priority. You can get those one-time gifts, but if you want the donor that's going to be with you year after year, you got to give them a place to invest. Just like your staff, they're valued. Show them where their impact is, and then you don't have to ask again. They usually are not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
super. And so the process that your management team used to develop the new value statement was via this leadership consultant that spent a couple of sessions as part of some other training. Is that right?
Yeah. He took our training course midway through, said, "Hey, let's stop this because your group's a little far ahead, and let's give you something that they can come out of," and that's where it came from. And so, if I were going to do it again, we would have started there, right? But I didn't realize we were developing our values when we were setting up our trainings over the last few years. He helped
Yeah.
us see it more clearly, and so sometimes you do
Yes.
need to bring a consultant in to understand where you're at.
Yeah, and identify gaps, right?
Uh-huh.
And so I guess I was going to ask the question, like, how did you decide to work on building your cultural statement, and how did you identify the need? So and how did you prepare the staff? But it's actually um, through experts that
Mhm.
you were working with. There was an identification of maybe a gap
Yeah.
in statement, not a gap in living out those things, because I'm sure you as an organization were doing those things intentionally and meaningfully, but yet you didn't have them recorded and sort of framed in the office, right?
Nope. Not at all. And that's what he said. He said, I see your staff are all aligned. They know what the mission is. They know what their role is. They don't always know why they're doing it. Let's put some names to it. And it worked out great. And the good news is, like, this consultant too had been a board member before, so he's very familiar with our organization too.
Yeah, right.
This, this is his first time to really work with the group on a leadership exercise. So he was able to identify some gaps, and he still will call and say how we're doing as we're checking on this process.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Well, bravo for this individual to surface that. Money well spent. Now that you sort of have these values identified, cultural values identified, do you post them up? Like, how do you use them? And then, what does success look like for the values rollout, like a year from now?
All right. Yeah. So we've created a culture statement, a paperwork framework that we're going to go out. But the way we're going to do it is, right, we got 300 employees, give or take, throughout the year. We can't meet with everybody. We got preschool, right? You can't take them all out because they're from bus drivers or all over the place. So what we're going to do is we're going to train our managers who developed it to then go train it. So we're starting with our board in February 24th. We're going to present it to the board, walk them through it. March 7th, we're doing a Saturday. We're bringing the managers in. And the first thing we're going to do is, right, we all have our own intrinsic values. And again, same thing, we don't put our names to it. So there's a company out there that creates value cards. And so it's like a deck card, 52 cards. You go through some process, you pick your first 10 or 20, and then you whittle it down until your five most important. And so we're going to do that first, just so they understand their own values. And so they'll do it twice. One time they'll have five, the second time they'll have five. And then from that, we're going to have them pick three. And then they're going to share with a partner or two about what their values are. And then we're going to talk about, okay, your values are important. The values you bring every day, we hired you because we saw those values in the interview. Now let's put the values on what we can hold each other accountable for. And then what we're going to do is, we've got hundreds of these decks of cards now. They're going to roll it out to all their staffing and group so that they can challenge each other, right? We've got a mission statement. I know the mission statement by heart. I can screw it up too. Some of our employees know it. They don't know it. You hope that they all want it. So for me, for success in this is that every employee knows their values or knows about values, and that they play a larger part in the culture and fabric of the club. And then the secondary goal is hopefully they can remember some of the values of the club, that they'll always remember the four pillars, right? So I should be able to walk up to somebody and say, what's the most important? If they can't say youth number one, I got a problem. Hopefully the office staff can say youth, and then financial stewardship. The development staff might say donor relations first, but that someone can claim one pillar and then one value. And our values, right? They're not these crazy statements. They're just words. And it's humility, exceptionality, passion, trust. And then the last one is legacy, right? They're going to leave a mark on here. I've got kids who have come to the club who've had kids. I'm really close to having club kids that have had grandkids now, right? But I'm not quite there yet. I've been through
So close.
marriages, divorces, a lot of stuff already. And so I didn't know that when I was 21 years old, 22 years old. I was helping these kids at that moment. So I want them to know they're going to cause a positive legacy in these kids. But in turn, I take great pride in when I see kids do great stuff. So it's going to help my own legacy and how I remember my career based on these kids' success. And in my role, I don't get to work with the kids directly anymore. So when I talk about kids now, essentially I'm talking about my staff members. Just this morning, we got an issue here with a group on one of our campuses. I said, hey, when that kid comes by, you tell him I'm going to be here at 1 and we're going to talk. And they said, Art, he's not a kid. And I said, listen, if he's younger than 32, to me, he's a kid. And so they said, oh, he's younger than 32. But they go, that's all of us. I said, yeah, you're my kid. Sorry, guys, I've gotten old enough now. You're my kids. So
That's right. That's
this
right.
is
It's
how
all
it
relative.
works. Yeah, and that
Yeah.
knowing they're my kids helps me stay focused. And again, when I get back to that understanding they're learning, they're growing. And just like my own kids, I want to support them and see the best for them. I want to create what's best for them, but I know that I need to send some of them off to go find out what's best. And I'll tell you one of the stats I'm most in love with about our organization over the last 3 years. We do a staff survey every year. We had about a 40 to 50% staff saw this as an organization they could grow their career in. We're up to over 80% now after 3 years, where my staff are starting to see that they can have a career in the Boys and Girls Club. And we just did our first measurement of tenure, since COVID. And my management team's averaging over 7.5 years. Overall, for my organization, it's over 4.2 years, including a program we just started 3 years ago with about 20 employees. They're averaging 2.2 years, and the program's not even 3 years old. So we're keeping folks. So the wages, our wages are still not as great as Starbucks, right? But the benefits that they get, the childcare, and what they're getting intrinsically when they come to work, feeling supported, it's making a difference. And so, we know we can't keep them forever, but when we get them, we want to invest in them, and we want them to be successful. My first meeting with my group was, my goal is not only to protect this Boys and Girls Club, but if I'm not helping other nonprofits, if I'm not helping other businesses, right, make money, and sending you guys out, I want to have this network of people the Boys and Girls Club have elevated through employment, through society, through their parenthood. And so that's our goal, and so, and through
It's
that,
wonderful.
I get to benefit the youth, the real kids,
Yeah, that's right. The other kids.
the other
Right.
kids.
There's a variety of kids. But I love how in some ways the mentor that you mentioned earlier about showing love in the ways that he served his kids is modeled for you there as well in the way that you take care of your staff and want them to be successful and are sad when they leave, but they're going out into the world and you're gonna continue to be with them and help them and support them and all of that good stuff. Um, and I love also the way that you connected their individual values with the organizational values. That's a neat little hack there for those leaders out there that are paying attention, ways to engage their board, ways to engage their staff with the personal values, bringing it into the organizational values in a way that feels authentic and not forced, which is so important. But I wonder about some of the challenges you've anticipated as you bring these values into everyday work. Are there some challenges that you foresee? Are there some things you're fearful of? Like what's on your mind when it comes to the other side?
Yeah, so like everything, when you roll it out, there's going to be somebody who says, well, you missed this. You didn't include this. I think this. And it's like, yeah, I know. And they are. And so that's why we're going to spend a lot of time on the individual, because besides these values that we're all agreeing on, there are so much more. And that's what you get to bring in to the organization. That's where your individual growth, your individual values, your individual culture. And it's like I tell them too, and we've all heard this, right? Culture eats strategy for lunch, right? We have not been successful because we decided strategy. Our strategy was invest in our staff, make them realize what I told my C-suite group was, listen, our directors need to understand they are the CEO of their program. They
Right.
can't wait for Art to walk in and say, why isn't this done? They need to be coming to Art and say, why haven't you done this for me? And so that's really where we're working on this. so that if I can keep investing in them, if I can tell them they're part of the fabric and they see their own values in our company values, they will feel safe to come in and say to Art, you have failed in here. We need to do this. Or Art, I see an opportunity here that I think you're missing. We can grow here. And so that's the whole point, because the goal is when I leave, I'm gone. These people who are already running it, who I take credit for all their success right now already, that they will continue to do a good job, but they get to see themselves in my seat now. And the sooner they can start seeing that, the more successful they'll be. And honestly, I'm going to lose some people too, because they're going to see that they have true value beyond the Boys and Girls Club. And but that's a good thing for me. That's a really good thing for them. It will be a good thing too. And I've got one couple who met at the Boys and Girls Club. Husband's been a teacher for 20 years. The wife, when she worked for the Boys and Girls Club, she was in college, and she said, "I'm going to be a doctor." It's like, we don't have a lot of employees that are going to be a doctor. She worked for a few years, ended up dating this gentleman. Want to be, sure enough, she's a doctor. They got two kids in the community they live in. I see them all the time, but they always talk about, as successful as they are, man, I love working at the Boys and Girls Club. And it's like, okay, what made you love working at the Boys and Girls Club? And our value statements and trying to develop this culture is trying to define that, so that these folks realize they're in a place people love, right? Whether they're with it or beyond. And so that's our goal. We just want people to be part of the fabric. So
And I sort of equate it to staging a house that's for sale. Some people have the vision, understand what those values are, could probably name them even without the list, without the furniture being in the house. And then other people just can't identify, can't name, can't envision things without it being in black and white. And I think it's helpful too when I think about recruitment, when you're talking about to a young individual who you want to join the team, or a 60-year-old who you want to join the team as well, the compelling differences of why you're going to enjoy working here, and why this is a great decision for you to join this team.
Yeah, and it's made a difference. Our referral rates from employees to hire other employees are through the roof. You know what I mean? Because it was so hard to hire folks during COVID, but having folks share with others that's a good place to work has helped us fill our gaps that others couldn't fill. And that helped us grow. When opportunities presented itself, it wasn't, oh, I don't have staff, I can't. It was, all right, let's make it happen. And that's how we came out really strong.
Yeah. Well, in moments of conflict or disagreement, how do you expect these values that you've now codified to guide decisions and behavior?
Yeah. So, one thing I can tell you, right, I've been out of the HR side of the operations for a while. We have less struggles in the last 3 years with staff across departments uh, not getting along. And so I think it's from developing some of the understanding. Obviously, like I said early, we didn't name the values when I started on this position 5 years ago, but we showed the values. We knew what we wanted to do, and people felt that. We still have those issues. But when we meet with people, it's more of an understanding of, okay, this is what we need to accomplish. This behavior is what's causing us from not being able to do it. Can we fix it together? Or you guys want to agree you don't fit into this culture? And those have been the conversations. We just had one of those yesterday at one of our branches. And it was, hey, you're not fitting in here culturally. You're conflicting here, but this group is doing really well and they've had some success here. So we're moving them over. And so with our staff, our mantra, and has been for a lot of years for staff, is train, transfer, and then unfortunately, if you have to, terminate. And usually the training works. And if that doesn't work, they know, because they've had the conversations about fitting in, what it takes to be successful in the Boys and Girls Club, what it's going to take to be successful in their own career outside of the Boys and Girls Club, right? We all know, show up to work on that, be dressed appropriate, be clean and tidy, be attentive, right? Those are things we have to train some of these younger kids when they're in college about these things. And I'll tell you, I'm not a big fan of online learning, because these kids can go to school in their bed and they think they can come to their job in their bed clothing.
Right.
And so that's part of,
Interesting.
one of our first things, right? Exceptionality. That's our way of saying,
I
in
see.
order to thrive, you've got to set the tone for the kids. And so we have a lot of people. One of the biggest conflicts with us, and when we set up values, is right. I've got tattoos. You can't see them. I don't have a lot of piercings, but we have in our HR policy very strict guidelines around piercings, tattoos, and clothing because it's important to us. It's part of our culture. We've got to show the kids that they all belong and that there's not just a sect or a clique. And so we've been really working on that. I get a lot of, especially with the tattoos. Art, how are you going to hire anybody regarding tattoos? I got no problem with tattoos, right? But I need someone that understands this is our value. And then if
Yeah.
they don't want to concede to that value, that's cool. That's their choice. And so it's been working that itself out. And again, it's one of those things, the louder you are about it, the more it plays out for people because they understand it, they can see it, they can feel it, and they're either going to go up against it and cause a major problem, and we're going to be identify that early, or they're going to jump on board and understand what we're doing and say, "Yeah, I want to be part of this group and I want to grow."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Thank you. Well, what advice would you give to other leaders preparing their organizations for a values-centered initiative like you undertook?
Yeah, I think listening to staff and truly, right. We've all heard service above self, right? I don't know. My dad, when I was a kid, I loved baseball. When I was a kid, my dad worked hard. He had a blue collar job. He knew I loved baseball. After baseball practice, he'd park his car in the outfield with the lights on so he could mow the lawn. So I'd have someplace great to play in the baseball field, right? And then on weekends, we'd go over and do turf maintenance. So, obviously my dad's one of my mentors because I saw my dad do that, and so now
Wow.
that's what I like to do. I think that's always why I like logistics. I saw my dad do it. It's like nobody asked him, but Little League Field didn't have anyone take care of it. My dad just took care of it because he knew it was important to me. And so for the leaders, I say, if it's important to you, make sure it's important to your staff first. And again, like I said, we did a slow rollout. I knew where we were deficient. And so we invested in those areas to build our team. From that, then the team said, hey, we've got these values, let's share it and codify it. And so it was my team. And so it's really listening to your team. And then the other part is if you're really having a culture and value issue in your organization, you're not quite aligned, bring in somebody else, right? Make them the bad guy. And because they'll take on the work, they'll trust me. When you bring somebody else on, you think, oh, my problem's going to go away. Chris Looney's going to take care of it for me. No, no, no. Chris turns around and challenges you and gives you a lot
Yeah.
of work. So if you think you're getting
Right.
off the hook, you're not. But it's been some of the greatest exercises I've had by having other outside consultants. And then the way I choose consultants is from word of mouth, people I know whom I trust to refer to
Right.
somebody. And so do that and just know it's a great journey. And if it's done right and you get people to buy in and they get to have their voice heard, you're going to have great success. If you try to force it down someone's throat, and sometimes things have to be done that way, it's going to be harder, and so just make sure you're going to have to hold the line. And, I'm really happy because in this, I got people that are anxious for this, and so uh,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah, isn't it nice to not have to drag someone through a process, but actually have them pull you along and be excited about that? I say the same thing about campaign work, right? You always know you're in trouble when you're the only one that's advocating for a particular fundraising project, but when you have volunteers and donors pushing to make something happen, you feel more encouraged, like, oh, wait, this might actually happen.
Yeah, at our annual meeting in January, I rolled out to the board and the staff that were there and the community members just some of our value statements real quick, just tell them this is where we're going in 2026. The next morning, one of our very good mentor of mine, great board member, Mr. Haynes, called me and said, Art, I saw that one of your values was humility. And it was like, yeah, Mike, it is. And we talked about it, and he texted me a homily on humility just to really reinforce, like, I get it. I like that you love it because I love it too. And this is where I practice it. And it was like, I think we're heading in the right direction. You know what I mean? I think we're heading in the right direction. And there was nothing better than having that call. And yeah, So it was gratifying. And so I know Mike's now waiting to see what we're doing. And when we did our values, we didn't just talk about our values for our organization. It was like, okay, so these values, how are you going to apply it to the children? How are you going to apply it to your fellow team members? How are you going to apply it to the folks you supervise? You know, and then how are you going to apply it upwards to your supervisors? Are you going to turn
Mm.
around and value your supervisor? And are they worthy of that? And that's where I get to, right? Do I have supervisors that are worthy of it? And so those are what we actually talked about. And so we've identified the values, and in each of those four subject areas I told you, those people that matter, we put comments in each one too, so that people can realize that they're part of a bigger mission. And you hear a lot of mission work, mission work. I've been part of the movement for a long time. People don't always get that. And when they say movement, they're like, wait, what juice are you trying to feed me, Art? But this helps them understand you're part of something bigger. You're
Mm.
really making it, even if it's just a job for college, you're making a difference. And I'll tell you, my daughter is a teacher. And as she kept going through her teaching career, all she said to me is, Dad, every teacher should have to work at the Boys and Girls Club to understand how to manage students before. She goes, I spend all my day training folks how to manage kids. And so we create a lot of teachers at the Boys and Girls Club, and we're proud of that. But it's a crazy, crazy, crazy world.
Yeah, no, I just got goosebumps thinking about how valuable employees and growing up in the Boys and Girls Clubs can be in preparing youth for the careers that they're going to face in the future. And, dealing with people is probably more difficult than the expertise that they have in the medicine or the electricity or the whatever, right? It's
You know?
usually the people management, people dealing part of the work that's the most challenging.
Yes, for sure.
And I
For
suppose
sure.
that's where the values work uh, becomes incredibly meaningful, valuable, important. Let's wrap up with two questions. And I think, this is probably an interesting one for you because now that you've created these values and you're rolling them out, the question then, how do leaders sustain momentum once the initial rollout is complete?
Right. Yeah, right. And that's the greatest thing about being CEO, right? Every time you think you hit the top of the mountain, guess what? No, Chris asks you a question.
Yeah.
You got to keep it going, right? You got to keep.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
It's not.
genius.
Yeah.
Now what?
Now what? And so here, so I'm having to think about that. And one of the things I'm thinking about is I've been working on this acronym for the last 2 years. And Chris, maybe you
Okay.
and I can write a book on it. And
Okay.
it's right because that's what we do. The basis of what we do is serve. And so when I talked to you earlier about understanding, to me, it's really important to look at things. Share. I forget where I heard this story. I share it with my staff once a year, right? Bus stop, city bus in front of a hospital. Dad gets on with three kids. They proceed down. Dad's staring out the window. Kids are misbehaving. They're running around. People are trying to get his attention, but he's just staring out the window. Kids are getting worse and worse behaved, jumping on seats, screaming up and down. Finally, someone gets bold enough to tap Dad on the shoulder and say, "Hey, can you take care of kids?" And he snaps out and goes, "Oh, I'm so sorry. We just left the hospital. Their mother just passed away. Kids, come sit with me." Right? Now, had you known that when the dad got on the bus, you would have been
Right.
pulling out whatever candy you had in your backpack or purse. You would have.
Right. Right.
And so now this acronym of SERVE is building on understanding. And so my acronym for right now, it's not a finished product, but you ask the question
Okay.
about how do I keep going? See everyone and realize value in everyone. And so it's like I tell people when you see, I really want to do a lot of work with folks that are unhoused. When you see someone unhoused, they were somebody's son, somebody's brother, maybe somebody's dad, uncle, right? Sure, they are who they are right now, but they're still that person. And so same
Right.
with the kids. And there are kids that come to the club that behave because they don't know any better, right? And whatever they're dealing with, they're dealing with. There's kids that misbehave on purpose, but take the time to understand. And so we're working on serve. And so as we roll out these values, the next is going to be defining our service. And so what does it mean to serve? And for me, serving means understanding, right? We can all identify a problem, but can we understand how they got to that problem? And if we can understand it, we're going to look at it through compassion and we're going to want to find a fix. And so I'm working on that acronym. I think it'd be a great little book, like a Tuesdays with Murray, serve with some stories about
Yep.
understanding and how to
Yep.
serve, and something that you could take on the road and then talk to people about. So, Chris, I'll
Yep.
give it to you, and you can
Okay.
think about
All right.
that. When I talk about how it's going to be successful and how I'm going to keep it going, it's letting people know that, hey, now your job, you got to understand your job is service. And so,
So the first one was easy because you started with see and be seen, right?
yep,
Okay, so we just need to finish out with the ERVE and then we're done. So
yeah,
no problem. But by dinner we'll have this book written, okay?
yeah, not a problem, not a
But
problem.
But that's great that you answered that question about sustaining the momentum, and that's terrific because it's going to obviously, like anything that's valuable and values, um, it's important to feed it, to sustain it, to improve upon it maybe as well, not just kind of birth it and then let it try to survive on its own.
Right. And the good thing for us too, as we have our statement, right, we're going to get to roll this out to parents, right? So they understand when they come. And so we do different parent education. So we'll get to roll that in. And then some of our team members too. We're really going to get them to be part of it as well because they have a voice in the club and they get to dictate what we do, how we do it. And so we'll keep beyond staff. We're going to roll it out to other groups, but we're heading towards understanding service. And so that's where we're going to keep building this. And so we're just building the ladder.
Yeah, well, even just having this conversation made me think about my own personal values, and I jotted down a few notes. I won't bore people with what I came up with,
Please do.
maybe I borrowed some from you, and maybe I borrowed one from Mike Haynes, and
Yeah.
or the two of you. So anyway, I love the fact that people listening to this are probably now thinking a little bit more clearly about what their own values are, not what they think they are today versus 6 months ago and 6 months henceforth, but like write it down. What do you really believe? And
Yeah.
what do you want others to know about you? And I think that's great for leaders to be able to share those with their staff, and then it's up to those leaders to live it out.
Yeah.
So if you believe in humility, other people are going to know pretty quickly whether you're a humble person or not.
Or not.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Be tasked to the mat a few times, and that's good, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll
Right.
grow in it. Hopefully you'll revert back to other values you're stronger at, understand the message you got, clean yourself up, and then hold yourself accountable to them. So
That's
that's
right.
hopefully
Yeah.
good.
And this work is not about um, sort of for everyone else. Like I'm immune from this as a leader. I'm perfect. I figured myself out. This is for everyone else who's falling short, right? This is you holding the mirror in front of yourself as much as every other member of the team.
100%. Yeah. Hopefully
Yep.
me first. Yeah.
Me first. Love that. Yeah. Okay, so last question,
Okay.
and then we'll wrap. What keeps you personally energized about this work that we're doing in the values arena?
Yeah, I think for me it's growth, right? And the growth is people feel confident to stand in front of other people. People feel confident to lead. I got some great people and they're kind of quiet. The other day we were in a meeting and we rolled out these book vending machines, but now we need someone to kind of champion, right? We got them in machines, we cut the ribbons, we've got the books, but we need to sustain it. Someone I did not expect before I could even say, okay, who is anybody considering being in charge? The hand was already up. And so a year ago, that hand would have never been up. And so I think they're seeing they help create this culture guide. They're seeing that they're valuable. We're listening to their voice. They'll come into my office and share insight now. So they're seeing themselves be
Yeah.
successful and understanding they're a large part of the team, and hopefully they're a huge part of the success. And I guess I used to have a Rob Parker. I think he's the president of the Zach Brown Foundation right now. Years ago, he shared with us in a training, don't believe your own press releases. And so for me, that was like, oh, you better not have press releases. Why ever tell a story? But the part I missed was no, he was saying, do press releases. People need to know what you're doing, but don't become the guy that believes what you're writing all the time. You have
That's
to
right.
put out and do out. And so I've really rethought that over the last couple of years, because as I'm struggling with humility, right? We have a few successes here. You got to remember, though, if donor stewardships, donors want to support winners. You got to show them that you're a winner. You got to own up if you make a mistake, but you got to show them you're a winner. But as a leader, I need to look at every win as just a stepping stone to the next one. And so that's what I'm challenging myself.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. Well, Art, thank you for this thoughtful conversation. Your work at the Boys and Girls Clubs highlights why culture is not an abstract idea, but a living foundation for every decision, every interaction, and every success that is sure to follow. For our listeners, if you're thinking about values, culture, or organizational alignment, I hope this episode gave you practical ideas and inspiration to move forward with confidence. Thank you again for joining Lead for Good. Don't forget to check out Mastering Fundraising and the Nonprofit Edge, our other two podcast offerings. But thank you again for joining, and we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you for joining us for this most recent episode of Lead for Good. Our passion is helping nonprofit leaders reach their full potential as leaders, and we sincerely hope this episode has been edifying for you. Please subscribe to this podcast to not miss any of our Lead for Good conversations. We welcome your feedback, suggestions, and comments via email at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Lead for Good is a production of Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership. Please visit us on the web at www.fulcrumleader.com. Until next time, we wish you all the best and encourage you to always lead for good.